In the beginning, there was only the Aether and the Keepers. Among them were two beings who would later be known by many names. One would be known as Dr. Monty, the other as the Shadow Man. This video will focus on Dr. Monty, explaining his origins, history, and some past actions in the zombies storyline. I'll have separate videos for other important characters like the Shadow Man, so look out for those on my channel coming soon. The histories of both characters start in a very similar way, so these videos will have a little repetition at first, but it doesn't take long for them to diverge and evolve very differently. As you watch these videos, see how many examples between these characters you can notice of obvious duality, yin and yang, good and evil, dark and light. There is deep symbolism surrounding both Monty and the Shadow Man throughout their lives, so keep an eye out for it. Before we get started though, did you know Dr. Monty watches my videos? Normally, this could be an ad break, I could do a brand deal integration here, something like that. But no, I'm talking about an actual email that Treyarch sent directly to me in the build-up to Revelations. Have a listen.
I tell you the best breakfast I've ever had. A nice big Belgian waffle with a side of milk. Lovely. Do you feel like one?
Not only does Monty like waffles, which is great news for me, but also, he made a reference to an old joke I had on my channel in like 2015, where I would call my viewers melons. Like, he actually knew that. This guy really does know everything. So, with that out of the way, let's get back to the story. To truly understand Monty as a character, we need to spend some time talking about his origin story amongst the Keepers, so we'll cover that first and then move on to his present-day activities. Monty is easy to recognize due to his green tartan jacket and red scarf. Regardless of the physical form that he assumes at a given time, he is always likely to be wearing these two specific pieces of clothing. This was suspected by the zombies community when Monty was first revealed, but has since been confirmed multiple times. In fact, Monty's scarf appears in multiple zombies maps just to indicate his presence, tied on various posts in Origins and also present in Zetsubo no Shima, for example. The Shadow Man also has his own clothing of choice. Another similarity shared by Monty and the Shadow Man is their ability to change appearances. Both can, for example, present as an elderly human man if they so desire, or if circumstances permit, they can show their true squid-like forms. Back when things in the story were just getting started, Apothicons didn't exist yet. There were only Keepers. As such, Monty was good friends at the time with the Shadow Man. Here's what Dr. Monty had to say about his old friend.
He was the sweetest, most charming individual you could ever wish to meet. He was funny too. We used to have such a good old laugh together. Honestly, my sides hurt thinking about it. He was my friend. He was my best friend.
So everything started off pretty happy. While things were going well, the Keepers crafted the Summoning Key, an object which is now one of the oldest artifacts in all creation. The key has become an iconic image in the zombies community, in part due to the intricacies of its design and extremely recognizable golden glow. This concept art for the key shows just how detailed and layered its construction truly is. Almost like a perfectly constructed timepiece with the benefit of plenty of alien engineering and craftsmanship. Interestingly, very similar looking objects called Apples of Eden exist in the Assassin's Creed universe, which are also imbued with similar properties and significance. The summoning key can be used to manipulate the ether, and it was just as powerful back then as it is in the storyline today. For example, it was use of the key which allowed for all the dimensions in the multiverse to be mixed with life, giving each one its own unique balance. The key is also able to form bridges between dimensions, allowing the transfer of life forces back and forth. Using these powerful abilities of the summoning key, the Keepers created Agartha. This is pretty much the point where things started to go wrong for the entire multiverse. The Keepers knew that the summoning key could channel the energy of the ether and grant them huge amounts of power, but this power made some of them careless. It is a life force from the dead world that allows the bearer of the key to flow with all creation and access the power of the aether. So while the keepers were using the key, corruption from the dark side of the aether was leeching its way into the keepers' realm and was beginning to twist their minds. This corruption did not affect all keepers equally. Monty, for example, managed to resist temptation and stayed true to his duties as a being amongst the keepers. However, others began to experiment directly with the dark aether, which started to corrupt and corrode their souls. One of the beings amongst those keepers, either too hungry for power or curious about the potential of the summoning key, was Monty's friend, the Shadow Man. While the untainted keepers kept their distance, the corrupted keepers fixated on an entirely new goal of creating the Aether Pyramid, a device capable of absolute power. The uncorrupted kept a close eye on the progress being made, and eventually they had no choice but to intervene when they saw just how deeply the claws of the dark Aether had sunk into their old friends. The Aether Pyramid, aside from its other uses, essentially magnified the desire of the corrupted keepers for domination, filling their minds with dark thoughts from which they would ultimately never escape. Other characters in the zombie story would later suffer similar fates by a simple touch of the pyramid's walls. A clear divide formed at this point, a schism if you will, between the corrupted and uncorrupted beings, eventually resulting in a war breaking out. It's tempting to call this a great war, because it certainly wasn't a small-scale scuffle, but rather a realm-wide struggle for universal power. However, there are multiple other great wars that we need to deal with later in Zombies, so instead, let's call it the War of Agartha. Bear in mind, Agartha had only just been created through use of the key. Its very existence and point of origin straddled the divide between the two warring factions, and it would in many ways be the catalyst for catastrophic events to come much later in the Zombies storyline. The War of Agartha could only ever have one winning team, and Monty was hoping it would be the uncorrupted keepers that would come out on top. This bet paid off. The corrupted keepers, including the Shadow Man, were not strong enough to overcome their old brothers and sisters. Perhaps the twisted malfeasance eating at their souls held them back, or maybe the corrupted keepers were always going to take this initial victory. Either way, a new hierarchy in the universe was established, and Dr. Monty found himself placed comfortably at the top of the food chain. The Shadow Man and any other remaining corrupted survivors were condemned to a place beneath creation itself, inside the dark aether. Their final act while free, as the war was being lost around them, was to place the Aether Pyramid on the moon in a newly discovered dimension. As soon as they completed this task, they were banished. Over time, left to stew and rot in their own failure inside the dark aether, the corrupted keepers mutated, their bodies and minds contorting under the weight of their internal sickness. Depending on your perspective, you could see this transformation as ascendance, or as utter destruction. Whichever way you cut it, the process ended in the corrupted keepers adopting a new name entirely: Apothicons. The Apothicons would later wreak havoc across much of the multiverse, all in a desperate plight to return to Agartha and consume all of the worlds around them. However, as this is a video about Monty, let's focus on him for a bit now. As the uncorrupted keepers had won the Agarthan war, they now had to assume new roles within their realm. The Apothicons simply couldn't be allowed to escape their punishment, so the keepers positioned themselves as protectors and wards of all universes in the multiverse. Their eternal goal from this point would be to maintain their established balance in the realm, preventing the Apothicons from re-entering and corrupting any future universes. To do this, they would need to pay close attention to beings within the multiverse that may fall under Apothicon influence. After all, if keepers were the first victims of the lure of the dark aether, other alien life, and even humans, would no doubt be susceptible to the same temptation. Bear in mind, at this point, there isn't necessarily a good side and a bad side. While Monty associates with the Keepers and the Shadow Man associates with the Apothicons, there is more ambiguity to all this than at first it may seem. The wording I've used might suggest that the corrupted Keepers who became Apothicons must have been bad, as they were sick, they mutated, they lost their previous forms. However, this could equally be viewed as the universe starting out with lots of evil beings called Keepers, and then a moment of enlightenment taking place, causing the corruption to actually liberate the minds of some of those Keepers and introduce good into the world in the form of the Apothicons. While Monty and the Keepers won the War of Agartha and went on to attempt to protect all universes, you could equally view this as an act of oppression, an attempt to rule the multiverse for the rest of time. This is important to keep in mind because it helps us understand Dr. Monty a little better as a character. As time passed, Monty tried to keep a watchful eye on the events taking place within the multiverse, just like the Keepers were doing. Even though Monty is eager to give us the impression that he is a god, he isn't omniscient, and so he isn't able to keep track of every single little thing that happens, and sometimes he misses things that might be happening right under his nose. He also isn't omnipotent, despite the fact that he claims that he is. He's undoubtedly very powerful, but his power mainly lies in the manipulation of objects, ideas, and people that already exist, rather than the creation of entirely new things. A good example of this is the mystery box. This is of course an item that Monty didn't create himself, but rather infused with his own extra layer of magic to allow for weapons to be infinitely drawn from it. The same can be said of clues within the maps that we play, hints that help us navigate, pointers to keep us heading in the right direction. All of these things are the work of Dr. Monty himself, getting involved here and there without doing anything that might be too obviously the work of a higher power. Chalk drawings, gumball machines, ammo drops, these were all influenced by Monty too. A fan favourite example is the perk drinks we've all come to love over the years. Perks were originally created by 935, but Monty used their creation as a springboard to achieve his own goals, and to ensure our characters were able to complete their missions regardless of the scale of the difficulties of the tasks at hand. He even gave the creators of the perks the ideas for all the jingles, including Electric Cherry. But that's a MrRoflWaffles exclusive for another day. This is an important point to pause on. Helping our characters by giving them little nudges seems harmless enough, but it's worth thinking about Monty's motives. Why does he actually want to help our characters? If Monty nudged Group 935 to change the perk formula, could he have also added negative effects to the drinks, making our characters more susceptible to just go along with his plan without questioning their own actions? What are the goals that he wants to achieve exactly? These are all valid questions to keep in mind as you learn more about him. A cynic could even argue that if Monty is helping our characters move forwards, but their mission isn't even their choice in the first place, then he quickly seems much less noble and much more controlling and manipulative. Maybe beneath his charm, he's simply trying to ensure that whatever happens, the Keepers continue to dominate the Apothicons throughout the multiverse, so he can maintain his position at the very top of the hierarchy. I suppose it depends on your perspective. Let's talk a little more about Monty deciding the necessary destinies of our characters, rather than letting them make decisions for themselves. There's actually some irony here. Monty claims, multiple times, that he personally granted humanity the gift of free will, but he's more than happy to do the opposite and control people as soon as he needs something done for himself. There's a particular event in the Zombies storyline that is illustrative of exactly what I'm talking about here. When catastrophic events shook the foundations of the Earth, leaving Dr. Maxis, Ludwig, isolated, low on supplies, and desperate for help, Monty took on his human physical form and presented himself as a miraculous panacea. This is recounted in a message left for Richtofen by Dr. Maxis.
He explained everything to you. Though his very presence defied logic, defied reason, he told me that he would help. I could not refuse.
The children were withering away, and the earth had become a wasteland. But here was Monty, this godlike figure, stepping in and telling Maxis that he could set everything right. He could correct his mistakes if he just followed along with what Monty needed him to do. Did Maxis agree of his own volition? Sure, it seems like he did. But did he actually have any other choice? Perhaps not. So, a question for you to ask yourself: does that even really count as free will? From this point, the world around Maxis started to transform, time seeming to unwind against its natural order and spin back on itself. As this gradual transformation took place, Monty continued to appear to Maxis, despite the fact that Maxis was becoming more and more confused as these events happened. In fact, it got to the point where Maxis wasn't even sure if Monty was even really there. He thought he might be dreaming, but maybe this just was his reality. Eventually, after enough time spent observing and talking to Monty, Maxis had learned enough to begin being able to explore new dimensions from within the confines of his house, and it was at this point that Monty revealed the next stage of his plan. He wanted to resolve the paradoxes inevitably created by the delinearization of time caused by 115 present within the multiverse. Monty had a vision for a perfect world, free from Apothicons, with all other realities closed off, such that his old allies, including the Shadow Man, would simply cease to exist. Pretty ominous, right? Even so, Maxis didn't seem to notice, as he was firmly under Monty's thumb at this point. He agreed to set the wheels in motion for the plan to be executed, and kick things off by calling in an old favour Richtofen had promised him many years ago. Skipping forwards in time, this is meant to be more of an origin story for Monty. We reach the culmination of this plan in Revelations. This was the point where, in theory, Monty should have been able to banish the Apothicons from existence and create his own perfect, innocent reality without any corrupting influence. The Shadow Man had managed to bring forth the Apothicons by escaping the summoning key, which was kind of Maxis' fault, and this set the stage for a massive battle to take place. The Shadow Man attempted to dissuade the characters, the Primus crew, from working with Monty, and told them that Monty was actually lying to them all.
You do realize that he's manipulated you? That's what he does. Dr. Monty is just one of the many names he's been known by. The Great Dragon, the Beast, Beelzebub, Lucifer, Satan, the Devil. Is this ringing any bells?
However, as usual, Monty played his Uno reverse card and told the crew that the Shadow Man was the liar, not him. It seems that, in this case, the words of the Shadow Man fell on deaf ears, and the characters kept working to enact Monty's grand plan. At this point, Maxis was little more than a mouthpiece for Monty, something that Monty actually directly acknowledged.
Oh, Maxis, you worry too much. In fact, aside from worrying, what do you do these days? As far as I can tell, you just repeat whatever I say in radio messages. No offense, of course. It's important to feel relevant. Big fan of what you do.
Look, they're here.
Well, well, well. Sometimes free will does work out. Look at how he's used it. Trying to right wrongs instead of skulking about in the house talking into a microphone.
Put the toys away, children. Make sure the windows are locked before you come down to the basement.
Good call on the windows there, Max. This whole process can get a bit messy.
So, it might appear that everything was playing into Monty's hand exactly as he wanted. However, a wild card was still present. a factor that Monty admitted he didn't understand. That factor, that wild card, was Richtofen.
I have to admit something to you, Edward. Something I've never, ever had to admit to anyone before. It's really quite embarrassing. You ready? Well, here it is. I don't understand you, matey. I don't understand a single thing about what makes you tick. You are the closest thing to an absolute distillation of obtuse obstructionism and unparalleled maniacal chaos in human form as it is possible to imagine. Look, I know you've had a lot to deal with. I know how hard you've been trying, but I really can't be sure exactly why you're doing it. I mean, it's not as if you owe Maxis anything. Is it? I don't know. Maybe some of the paranoia is starting to rub off on me. But let me tell you this, my little German friend. I've got my eye on you.
Through use of the blood vials, Richtofen saved the crew from permanent erasure from time itself. Monty's perfect world was not created, and instead, a new paradoxical loop was established for the characters to eternally cycle through. It's worth pausing here and noting that the Shadow Man was actually being truthful with the crew when he warned them during Revelations about their fate after Monty's plan was finished. He knew that Monty would try to wipe them from existence, and he tried to use that as a bargaining chip.
Has he told you what happens to you? What happens should you win the war? I'll tell you. I'm the only one that will be honest with you. You, all of you, will simply cease to exist. Despite everything you've done, everything you fought so hard for, you will simply fade away.
So, was the Shadow Man telling the truth at other times as well? Can we really believe Monty is a force for good? The moral line between the two is not so clear. They really seem to be two sides almost of the same worm. Regardless of what you think though, the Primus crew eventually made their own decision about Monty when they exited their eternal cycle by venturing to Alcatraz in Blood of the Dead. Their decision? Monty was indeed another enemy that they had to face after all, but it took them a long and painful time to get to that point.
Listen to how the spirits sing. They are free of this realm.
Ain't that swell? Does that mean we win?
I would be greatly relieved if that were so. I am in no hurry to ensnare my mortal soul.
That will not be necessary, Nikolai. The future has changed.
The Chronorium?
Read it. Learn of your true calling. You must keep your soul. It will be needed to defeat Dr. Monty.
Who?
They do not understand. The Earth. We saw it destroyed.
Americans still give Nikolai his vodka. Is that your plan, Nikolai? To give up and drink yourself to oblivion? Or do you want to make a difference for once in your life?
You. Oh, Scheiße.
You four must come with us. In time, it will make sense. But now... Intruders on the base. Now we must go, quickly. There is a war to be fought.
War? What kind of war?
A war unlike any you have ever seen. The Great War.
The newly combined forces of the Ultimus and Primus crews, now also with post-Revelations Richtofen, had to ensure that they were appropriately prepared before they charged forwards into their great war against Dr. Monty. Over the years prior, several prophecies had been made about the fate of the multiverse, and the crew needed to ensure that they did everything in their power to turn the odds in their favor. Alpha Omega provided a perfect opportunity for them to do this. Not only had Broken Arrow been attempting to reconstruct the Aether Pyramid on Earth, but they were also in possession of a coveted elemental shard. It is exceedingly rare to see such wildly powerful objects and concepts overlapping at the same point in time, so the characters made absolutely sure to make use of this serendipity while it was presenting itself. On that note, if you've made it all the way through to this point in the video and you haven't already liked it, subscribed, and hit the bell to turn on notifications, then here's a reminder to maybe do that. I've poured a huge amount of time into this video and will be pouring a huge amount of time into future zombie storyline videos, and I'd love to have you guys come along for the ride. The zombie story is huge and sprawling, and there's always something new that I could be talking about, so if you see an idea in the comments that you want to get turned into a video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, or if you've got your own idea, then leave a comment yourself. On screen right now, there are going to be links to potential other videos that you might be interested in. Feel free to go click onto those. Thanks for watching, everyone. I have been MrRoflWaffles, and I'll hopefully see you very soon in the future. Bye for now.